welcome United States Coast Guard retiree, Commander Douglas Sheehan.
Thank you. Memorials matter, and history matters. I'd like to tell you a few stories about why I believe that so passionately. I'd like to start in 1942 on the small island of Guadalcanal. There was a young 22-year-old Coast Guardsman, a signalman first class named Douglas Munro. He's my uncle, and I was named for him. He was in charge of a group of Higgins boats and a number of Coast Guard people there, and their job was to land a battalion of Marines on the beach at Point Cruz on Guadalcanal, and they did that. Everything went well, and they came back to the base, and when they got back to the base, his commanding officer said, "There's been a horrible problem. The Marines are pinned down. It was all a big trap, and if those Marines are not evacuated, they're all going to die. So I'm going to need people to volunteer to go evacuate the Marines." Everybody volunteered. When they got back to the beach, it didn't look anything like when they left it. With all the explosions and the gunfire and everything, it was like hell on earth. All the Marines made it away in the Higgins boats except for one boat that was caught on a coral reef. Douglas Munro saw that there was a machine gun being set up on the beach and by the enemy, and decided that he needed to move his Higgins boat in between the machine gun and the last boat of Marines. And just as they got the boat off and got the Marines to safety, Douglas Munro was hit and fatally wounded. And he is still, to this day, the only member of the Coast Guard ever awarded the Medal of Honor. His last words were, "Did they get off?" You'd think that that would be the end of the story in a lot of ways, but from a historical perspective, that's not true. So I'd like to start and talk to you a little about 1999. This is 57 years later. And there was a phone call that was made to the 13th Coast Guard District Headquarters in Seattle. The petty officer answered the phone. The guy on the other end of the line said, "My name is Mike Cooley, and I'm the post commander for the Douglas Munro VFW post in Cle Elum, Washington. And I'd like to try to get the Coast Guard to install a light at the cemetery in Cle Elum to shine on the flag overlooking Douglas Munro's grave. Because if there's a light shining on the flag, then I won't have to raise and lower the flag every day." And the petty officer said, "So how long have you been doing this?" And he said, 40 years. Every day, rain or shine, he would walk 3 miles from his home up to the cemetery, raise the flag, walk 3 miles back. At dusk, 3 miles back to the cemetery, lower the flag, and go home. He had come home from World War II, from the Army, alive, and his boyhood friend had not. He felt that if the roles had been reversed, that's what his friend would have done for him. So the Chief Petty Officers Association of the Coast Guard in Seattle and the city of Cle Elum and the VFW all got together and said, "We've got to do something about this." So they started raising money and installed a new flagpole and the light. They got all the money to do the flagpole, the light, and the city of Cle Elum installed a monument with the names of all the men and women of Cle Elum, Roslyn, and South Cle Elum who'd served in world wars, and placed that at the cemetery as well. All this happened. It took a while for it to happen, and the dedication ceremony for all of this happened 2 months after Mike Cooley died. But he knew that this was in place and it was going to happen. So there's a plaque to Mike Cooley on the cemetery as well. And to this day, we hold a ceremony in Cle Elum at that cemetery every year. So memorials matter, and history matters. So now I'd like to take you to 2004. A young Coast Guard lieutenant named Carrie Ash was serving on a Coast Guard cutter in the Caribbean, and their mission was to provide humanitarian relief for the people of Haiti after a devastating earthquake in Haiti. Her commanding officer said to her, "Your job when we dock in Port-au-Prince is to lead those 6 Marines over there, go ashore, and find some people in Haiti who need help, find a way to help them." She said, "Yes, sir." She thought about it after a little bit, and she walked over to the Marines and she said, "It's an honor to serve with all of you, but I'm a little concerned that this is an unusual assignment for me and for you. So before we go ashore, I just want to make sure you're okay with all this." The young Marine said to her, "No problem, ma'am. You came back, we're good." She was sort of surprised by that. Said, "I'm really pleased to hear that, but I have to confess, I don't understand what you meant when you said you came back." The Marine said, "Douglas Munro, Guadalcanal, you came back." Now, the ship that they were on looked a lot like this one. A little different Coast Guard cutter, but I show this because this is the 378-foot Coast Guard cutter Munro. Now I'd like to take it to 1982. I was escorting my grandmother to the 40th anniversary of Guadalcanal. It was in Winter Haven, Florida. She was the guest of honor, and she's the mother of Douglas Munro. And it was the first time in my life I got to meet Admiral Dwight Dexter. And it was a very big thrill for me because he used to be Lieutenant Commander Dwight Dexter when he was my uncle's commanding officer on Guadalcanal. It was the first and only time in my life I got to meet him, and it was a big thrill because I heard about him my whole life. Well, he had kept in Guadalcanal a logbook of all his time on Guadalcanal and kept it for 40 years. He was in his 70s now, and he said he wanted someone to have the book who would understand and appreciate its value. So he gave it to me. I thanked him greatly for it, and I've treasured it ever since. A few years later, I was on the phone with a retired admiral from the Coast Guard in charge of the National Coast Guard Museum, which still hasn't been built, but and he wanted to know if I had any specific things that the museum might like to have. And I told him the story of this logbook. And he said, "Wow, that would be fantastic if we could have that. We would display that very prominently and everybody would see it." I said, "Well, I'm very conflicted about what to do because on the one hand, I feel kind of guilty that I've been hoarding this book, keeping it in my safe, and it's just for me. And there's a part of me that says if thousands of people could see that book, it might be a better use of the artifact. On the other hand, this is very personal to me, and my gut is telling me that I need to keep it personal." So I told the Coast Guard I had to think about that for a while, and I did. And I was talking to my daughter, and she said, Dad, you can't give him that book. He gave that to you for a reason. And there will come a day when you'll be sitting on the sofa with your grandson, and he's going to want to know more about his great-great-uncle Doug, and you're going to tell him the story, and you're going to show him the book, and he will assign great value to that book because he knows that you assign great value to that book. So someday you will be at the Vietnam Memorial at the state capitol grounds with your children and your grandchildren, and your children will assign great value to that memorial because you assign great value to that memorial. Because memorials matter and history matters.